In the quiet moments of our lives, when our hearts are heavy and our spirits seek solace, we turn to the saints for guidance and intercession. Among them stands Saint Anthony of Padua, the miracle worker, whose compassion and power have touched countless souls throughout the ages. Today, we gather in faith and hope, seeking the most powerful prayer to Saint Anthony. Whether burdened by financial struggles, seeking healing, or yearning for family restoration, we open our hearts to his unfailing intercession, trusting that miracles await those who believe. O glorious Saint Anthony, you who have been called upon for centuries as the patron of lost things and the bearer of miracles, we implore your aid in our times of desperate need. Your powerful Catholic miracle prayer has brought comfort to the afflicted, hope to the hopeless, and light to those in darkness. We now seek your miraculous prayer to Saint Anthony, trusting in your compassion and divine connection. In moments of financial hardship, when the weight of debt and uncertainty presses upon us, we turn to you with an emergency prayer for financial help. Your intercession has led many to financial breakthroughs, and we believe that through your prayer to Saint Anthony for financial breakthrough, our burdens will be lifted. For those yearning for healing, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, we offer a healing prayer to Saint Anthony. Your touch has restored countless lives, and we trust in your unfailing prayer to Saint Anthony to bring us the healing we seek. Stay with us, dear listeners, for within this prayer lies the key to the miracle you have been waiting for. The moment. Saint Anthony hears your cry. There comes a moment in every believer's life when silence feels louder than any prayer whispered into the night. That's the moment your soul calls out, not with words, but with a deep, aching cry. And it's in that sacred silence that Saint Anthony listens. He is not distant. He is near, attentive, ready to act. When no one else sees your tears, he does. And in that instant, the gears of a miracle begin to turn. You may not realize it, but the most powerful prayer to Saint Anthony isn't always spoken aloud. It's felt. It rises from desperation, from the trembling hands of someone who's lost something vital. Peace, love, health, money, or even hope itself. That's why the urgent miracle prayer to Saint Anthony touches heaven so swiftly. It carries the rawest form of faith, surrender. And surrender is the language of divine intervention. Imagine a woman on her knees, bills piled high on the kitchen table, unsure how she'll feed her children. She doesn't recite a long prayer. She simply says, "Help me." That's enough. That becomes a prayer to Saint Anthony for financial breakthrough, because what matters is not the eloquence of the words, but the fire behind them. He hears it. He always does. Many have experienced this miracle prayer today, not because they deserved it more, but because they believed in the impossible. That belief transforms the impossible into the inevitable. Catholic prayer for miracles becomes a living river, flowing through your life, washing away what is broken and making all things new. It only takes one moment of genuine faith to begin. When you feel unseen, Saint Anthony sees you. When you feel unworthy, he reminds you of your divine value. This is not just a prayer to find lost things. It is a prayer to recover yourself, your dignity, your purpose. So many have found themselves again through this holy prayer for impossible requests. And now, it's your turn. What if your cry is the exact one heaven has been waiting to hear? What if today is the day you whisper the miraculous prayer to Saint Anthony and things begin to change faster than you ever imagined? There's a reason this prayer is passed from generation to generation. It works. It's not luck, it's grace. Let's talk about that moment when you hit rock bottom. That's not failure. It's the launch pad of your miracle. Saint Anthony has lifted people from the ashes of bankruptcy, divorce, illness, and depression. He specializes in what the world calls lost causes. But you are not lost. You are on the brink of restoration. There's power in this unfailing prayer to Saint Anthony that defies logic. It's not just religious sentiment, it's an engine of spiritual transformation. The broken are healed, the empty are filled, the desperate are delivered. And it all begins with one act of courage, to cry out and trust that He hears you. You don't need to wait until things get worse. You can invoke the prayer that works instantly, right now. Say it in your heart. Say it with trembling lips. Just say it. He will meet you in the space between your last hope and your next miracle. That's where Saint Anthony stands, on the threshold of divine intervention. Think of this. Every miracle has a sound, and sometimes it's the sound of a cry. Not a cry of weakness, but of release. A cry that says, I can't do this alone. That's when Saint Anthony moves, and suddenly things start to align. Doors open, money comes, peace returns, healing flows. This is your moment. And now that your heart is open and your cry has been heard, what if this is just the beginning? What if Saint Anthony has more to show you than you ever imagined? Because when one miracle comes, it rarely walks alone. It brings others with it. But to see the next step, you must walk with him a little farther. When heaven responds through Saint Anthony. When heaven responds through Saint Anthony, there is something profoundly beautiful about the timing of heaven. It rarely answers when we expect it, but when it responds, especially through the prayer to Saint Anthony, it's undeniable. You'll feel it in the way doors open, in the way anxiety lifts, even if the situation hasn't changed yet. That's the whisper of grace at work. Saint Anthony is not just a saint you call when something is lost. He is a divine messenger, a sacred channel through which Catholic prayer for miracles becomes real and tangible. He doesn't just return objects, he restores hope, relationships, peace of mind. This is what happens when heaven uses him to respond to your cry. So many people have told stories of sudden resolution, money showing up just in time, a job offer appearing after months of silence, a loved one returning with unexpected tenderness. Each of these started with a simple, urgent miracle prayer. And Saint Anthony, he responded, because that's what he does for those who believe. But here's the thing, heaven's response often comes in disguise. It might be a stranger's kindness, a phone call you weren't expecting, an inner peace that wasn't there yesterday. These are answers, even if they don't wear the costume you imagined. That's why faith matters. That's why this prayer that works instantly is so powerful. Don't look for lightning bolts. Look for alignment. The miraculous prayer to Saint Anthony doesn't just bring you what you want, it brings what you truly need. Sometimes the miracle isn't the money, but the wisdom to manage what you already have. Sometimes it's not the job offer, but the courage to leave what no longer serves your soul. When you say the holy prayer for impossible requests, understand this: you are opening a sacred line to heaven, and the answer begins forming the moment you believe it's possible. St. Anthony moves through the cracks in logic, through the spaces where human effort fails. That's where the divine steps in. Picture someone whose marriage was collapsing. They prayed not just for reunion, but for restoration. And one day, a conversation began. A small spark returned. That's the response of heaven. That's the prayer to Saint Anthony for family restoration, unfolding like a flower in spring. Quiet, sure, and steady. You're not asking too much. God delights in your dependence. And when you invoke this powerful Catholic miracle prayer, you're not just speaking into the air. You're calling upon centuries of faith, backed by testimonies of transformation. Saint Anthony is listening, and the answer is already echoing back. Sometimes the response doesn't come because we don't believe we're worthy of it. That's a lie. You are worthy. Your pain matters. Your struggle matters. That's why this emergency prayer for financial help works, because it's rooted in the truth that God provides, not because of who we are, but because of who He is. The more specific your prayer, the more personal the response. When you say the prayer to Saint Anthony for urgent help, don't hold back. Pour it all out. Be honest about your fears, your debts, your dreams. He is not offended by your needs. He is moved by your sincerity. And when the answer comes, and it will, don't be surprised if it feels bigger than what you asked. Saint Anthony often exceeds expectations. He brings not just recovery, but redemption, not just survival, but joy. That's how heaven loves, abundantly, through the hands of a saint who never stops interceding. So if you're wondering whether heaven still responds, this is your sign. This moment, this prayer, this whisper of faith. Stay with us, because the next mystery holds a truth even deeper, one that will shift your understanding of how divine love operates in your life. Faith that moves through Saint Anthony. Faith is not something you only find in a church pew or in moments of comfort. Real faith shows up in the middle of the storm, when there's no money in the account, when the diagnosis is terrifying, when love seems lost forever. That's where Saint Anthony shines. That's where your faith-filled prayer to Saint Anthony begins to carry weight in heaven. There's a reason they call him the miracle worker, not because he was lucky, but because his faith stirred heaven into action. When you whisper an impossible prayer that works, you're not just reciting words. You're planting a seed, and faith is the water. Faith unlocks the blessing you thought was out of reach. People often say, "I prayed, but nothing happened." What they really mean is, "I gave up too soon." Faith doesn't demand perfection. It demands persistence. The unfailing prayer to Saint Anthony is for those who refuse to give up, even when the situation seems beyond repair. That's when God does his best work. Consider this: a mother whose child has walked away from faith. She prays the prayer to Saint Anthony for family restoration day after day, not knowing when or if it will happen. Then one evening her child calls. One small step, one answer in motion. That's not coincidence. That's the power of intercession in action. Faith doesn't always feel like fire. Sometimes it feels like fatigue. But even tired prayers move mountains when spoken with belief. The Saint Anthony prayer carries your faith beyond what you can see and into the realm where miracles are born. Even if your voice shakes, speak it anyway. Saint Anthony is already listening. Miracles don't belong to the few, they belong to the faithful. And when you pray this Catholic prayer for miracles, you're tapping into a legacy of answered prayers that spans generations. It's not about your background, your knowledge, or your past mistakes. It's about the boldness to believe that God still moves. There's power in saying, "I don't know how, but I believe you will." That kind of faith, that surrender, is what turns the prayer that works instantly into a divine appointment. You don't have to understand the details. You just have to trust the direction. Saint Anthony will walk with you through the darkness until you see the light. Have you ever stood on the edge of a financial crisis and still tithed? That's faith in action. Have you ever prayed healing over someone while your own heart was breaking? That's faith. The healing prayer to Saint Anthony was never meant to be passive. It's a declaration of war against fear and doubt. Faith opens your hands to receive, but it also opens your eyes to recognize the blessing when it comes. Sometimes the miracle is already here, but we miss it because it didn't arrive in the package we expected. The miraculous prayer to Saint Anthony will tune your heart to heaven's frequency, so you don't miss the blessing right in front of you. Saint Anthony doesn't delay. He aligns. He moves in God's perfect time. And when you engage in this emergency prayer for financial help, know this: it's not falling on deaf ears. The delay is not denial. It's preparation. God is setting up a blessing that matches the size of your faith. Faith is what allows you to smile before the breakthrough, to breathe before the bills are paid, to rest before the diagnosis changes. That's the kind of bold belief Saint Anthony honors. That's why the prayer to Saint Anthony for urgent help has rescued so many. He sees your faith and he moves. Don't measure the effectiveness of your prayer by how fast you see results. Measure it by how deep your peace becomes. Sometimes the greatest miracle isn't the outcome, it's the transformation within you. And when you grow in faith, Saint Anthony walks closer. Heaven bends lower. Things begin to shift around you, and if you think this is as deep as your faith can go, wait. The next step leads to a sacred surrender, where your trust no longer hinges on the outcome, but rests entirely on the one who holds your miracle. What happens next will change how you pray forever. Surrendering everything to Saint Anthony's intercession. There comes a point when the weight of trying is too much. You've prayed, pleaded, planned, and still the answer hasn't come. That's when the most sacred act you can make isn't fighting harder, but surrendering deeper. True surrender isn't weakness, it's trust. It's the moment you say, "I give it all to you, Lord," through St. Anthony. The powerful Catholic miracle prayer doesn't begin in strength, it begins in surrender. When you bring your brokenness to the feet of St. Anthony, you are not giving up. You are giving in to grace. You are choosing to trust the process of heaven, even when you don't understand the outcome. And that is spiritual maturity. St. Anthony's greatest miracles began with someone letting go. A woman laid her divorce papers on the altar and prayed, "Take this burden." A man placed his empty wallet beside a candle and whispered the prayer to St. Anthony for financial breakthrough. They both surrendered, and their lives began to shift. God doesn't bless clenched fists. He blesses open hands. And when you say the miraculous prayer to St. Anthony, imagine opening your palms wide, releasing control, fear, and expectation. That's when something divine rushes in. What you were gripping so tightly might be the very thing God wants to replace with something better. Think about this. The moment you finally let go is often the same moment the miracle is released. St. Anthony doesn't move when we perform. He moves when we trust. So if you've been carrying something alone for too long, let today be the day you say, "St. Anthony, I surrender." Surrender isn't passive, it's powerful. It says, "I trust God more than I trust my fears." The prayer that works instantly doesn't demand perfect words. It asks for a perfect heart posture, one that says, "Your will be done." And through St. Anthony's intercession, heaven begins to align in ways you never imagined. You might be afraid that surrender means losing control. But what if the control you're trying to keep is actually delaying your blessing? When you say the prayer to St. Anthony for urgent help, you're not just asking, you're releasing. You're declaring, "God, I trust you more than my timeline." And that's when your soul exhales. That's when peace begins to flood places where panic once lived. That's when your healing prayer to St. Anthony becomes more than words. It becomes worship. Worship through trust. Worship through waiting. Worship through faith that says, "Even if nothing changes, I still believe." St. Anthony is not only a saint of miracles, he's a teacher of surrender. He reminds us that what we give to God, God multiplies. What we try to keep in our own hands, we risk losing. So today, place your needs, dreams, and anxieties in the hands of this great intercessor. Watch what happens when heaven receives them. There was once a man who carried years of guilt from a mistake he made. No amount of effort could erase it, but one day he prayed the holy prayer for impossible requests to St. Anthony. He didn't ask to forget, he asked to be free, and that surrender brought him healing he never thought he'd feel again. This surrender is not a single moment, it's a daily decision to wake up and say, "I release this again." To go to sleep knowing, God is working even when I can't see it. The unfailing prayer to St. Anthony is your daily invitation to stop striving and start resting in divine timing. You may be tempted to take back what you've surrendered. That's normal. But each time you return it to God, you grow. You build spiritual muscle, you deepen your roots, and St. Anthony walks with you through the journey, never judging, always guiding, always lifting you when you stumble. This is the path of peace, not through knowing what comes next, but through trusting the one who holds what comes next. Let your emergency prayer for financial help be filled with surrender, not panic. Let it be a prayer of release, because in the release there is rescue. And now that you've tasted surrender, you're ready to embrace something even greater, complete confidence in God's goodness. The next mystery will show you what it looks like to not only trust, but to boldly expect miracles, standing fully in faith without fear. The unshakable trust that unlocks the miracle. There is a kind of trust that shifts atmospheres. It's not loud, it doesn't demand, it simply stands. This is the trust St. Anthony invites you into. A trust so firm, so rooted in divine goodness, that even in the silence you feel secure. This is where miracles begin to flow, not from panic, but from peace. To pray the most powerful prayer to St. Anthony is to believe even before you see. It's choosing to look at an empty bank account and say, God will provide. It's hearing bad news from a doctor and still saying, healing is coming. That is unshakable trust. That is the foundation of true miracles. St. Anthony doesn't need your fear. He needs your faith. When you speak the prayer that works instantly, say it with expectation. Not hope laced with doubt, but confidence that God is already at work. Even if nothing seems to move around you, know that something is shifting above you. We often think faith is about feelings, but true trust stands even when feelings vanish. The woman who keeps praying despite tears, the man who keeps tithing despite debt, the child who keeps believing despite bullying, these are the ones who unlock heaven with the prayer to St. Anthony for urgent help. If you knew for sure that your miracle was coming tomorrow, how would you live today? That's the energy to carry when you say the miraculous prayer to St. Anthony, not desperation, but preparation. Start living as if the blessing is already on its way, because that mindset attracts divine movement. There's a difference between wishing and trusting. Wishing waits with uncertainty. Trusting walks in assurance. The prayer to St. Anthony for financial breakthrough doesn't just ask, it expects. It doesn't beg, it believes. And when you believe with your whole heart, the doors begin to open. People often ask, but what if it doesn't happen? That's fear talking. Try asking instead, what if it does? What if St. Anthony is already setting things in motion behind the scenes? The emergency prayer for financial help carries weight when it's infused with certainty, not just request. God responds to trust like flowers to sunlight. The more you lean in, the more His glory unfolds. St. Anthony is the channel, the bridge between your need and God's supply. Speak the unfailing prayer to St. Anthony as if the answer is already sealed, because in faith it often is. There's a man who lost his job and prayed daily with fierce confidence. Not once did he speak fear. He applied for jobs with a smile. Weeks later, he received an offer 3 times greater than his old salary. That is the fruit of bold prayer. That is what the Catholic prayer for miracles produces. The enemy's goal is to shake your faith, to whisper it won't work this time, but trust says, watch what God will do. That's why the holy prayer for impossible requests includes the word holy, because trusting God in the impossible is an act of sacred bravery. There is a spiritual law. Trust precedes the breakthrough, not the other way around. Don't wait for the miracle to feel safe. Stand strong now. Walk boldly now. Pray the prayer to Saint Anthony for family restoration, knowing that even fractured hearts can beat together again. Your trust makes heaven lean close. It causes Saint Anthony to take your request straight to the throne of God. And when the saints intercede, nothing is the same. That's why your healing prayer to Saint Anthony must come from a heart that says, even if the pain remains, I still believe. Trust doesn't ignore the facts. It simply places them under divine authority. The report says no, but God says wait. The situation looks hopeless, but the urgent miracle prayer says, try again. And when you obey and trust, you're stepping into the space where heaven delivers. The miracle may not arrive in the way you imagined, but it will come. It might take a different shape, use a different person, or arrive at a surprising time. But when you walk in full trust, the outcome doesn't rattle you, because Saint Anthony is already ahead of you, preparing the way. And now that you've learned how to trust without seeing, to believe without proof, you're ready for the final blessing. A moment to rest in the promises spoken over your life, because the miracle isn't just coming, it's already near. May the peace of God descend upon you like morning dew, quiet, gentle, and refreshing to your soul. May Saint Anthony, the miracle worker, wrap you in his intercession and bring light to every dark corner of your life. Where there has been lack, let there now be provision. Where there has been pain, let healing begin. And where hope has faded, may it rise anew in full strength. May every prayer to Saint Anthony for urgent help be answered with divine precision and timing. May your heart remain steady as heaven aligns the blessings you've been praying for. May your emergency prayer for financial help become the testimony that encourages others to trust. And may you see the fruit of your faith in your hands sooner than you think. To those seeking restoration of families, of love, of dreams, you are not forgotten. May Saint Anthony move swiftly on your behalf. May your prayer to Saint Anthony for family restoration be answered with peace, unity, and forgiveness. Let the bonds that were once broken be mended by divine grace. For the weary, may rest come. For the sick, may healing spring up. For the anxious, may calm fill your mind like a sacred stream. May this healing prayer to Saint Anthony bring strength not only to your body but to your soul. May every scar become a symbol of victory, not defeat. To the one who feels unseen, know this: God sees you. Saint Anthony hears you. And your miraculous prayer to Saint Anthony is not lost in the air. It is recorded in heaven, and the response is already moving toward you. Trust it, embrace it, prepare for it. May you never again feel the need to carry your burdens alone. May your unfailing prayer to Saint Anthony be a daily source of comfort and courage. Let trust grow stronger in you with each prayer whispered. Let surrender feel sweeter with each passing moment. You are never abandoned. May your finances shift, your debts dissolve, and your peace increase. May the prayer to Saint Anthony for financial breakthrough produce unexpected open doors and divine connections. May you no longer fear the future, but walk into it boldly, hand in hand with faith. To those crying for what seems impossible, take heart. Heaven specializes in impossibilities. May your holy prayer for impossible requests rise as incense and return as answered grace. You may have felt overlooked before, but from this day forward, may miracles find you. For every request made in tears, may Saint Anthony bring you answers wrapped in joy. For every doubt you've wrestled with, may he replace it with bold belief. Let your urgent miracle prayer be the beginning of your breakthrough, not the end of your rope. May love find you, may provision follow you, may peace surround you. May your spirit be lifted even before the blessing arrives, and when it comes, may you recognize it clearly and never again question whether God hears you. He does, and Saint Anthony walks beside you. May you be filled with courage to speak your powerful Catholic miracle prayer without fear, to stand firm in trust when storms rise. Let no doubt take root in your heart. Let faith anchor you in every season. And may Saint Anthony continue to intercede in every area of your life. From this moment on, may you walk differently, more confident, more grateful, more expectant. May the goodness of God and the intercession of Saint Anthony follow you all the days of your life. And may this prayer echo in your heart as proof that heaven truly answers. What if this was the turning point you didn't even know you needed? What if this prayer today set into motion the greatest transformation of your life? You are not the same person you were when this video began, and you won't go back to who you were before. Because once your heart is touched by Saint Anthony's intercession, everything changes. If this prayer touched you, don't keep it to yourself. Click like to show your agreement with heaven's plans for your life. Leave a comment with the word Amen to seal this miracle in faith. And if someone you love is struggling, share this video with them right now. Your act of faith could be the miracle they've been waiting for. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss a moment of divine power and encouragement. We're building a family of faith here, and you belong in it. When you subscribe, you're not just receiving content, you're joining a movement of miracles, one prayer at a time. Spread the blessing. Send this prayer to Saint Anthony, to 3 people who need a breakthrough. Let it travel far and wide. You never know who's sitting in silence, desperate for a word of hope. Be the one who delivers it. And finally, if this video blessed you, leave your testimony in the comments. Others need to hear your story. Your words might be the reason someone keeps believing. Let's fill this space with gratitude, victory, and the sound of miracles happening, one voice at a time.